The night sky lit up with a streak of blue fire. Jack Miller stepped onto his cabin porch, coffee mug in hand, and watched the object tear through the darkness above the pine trees. It wasn't a shooting star. It moved too slowly, and the trail behind it glowed an unnatural blue. "What the hell?" he muttered as the object crashed somewhere in the forest with a distant boom that echoed across the valley. Jack hadn't talked to another person in 3 months. After 10 years as a military medic and 2 tours that left him with nightmares, the quiet Montana woods were his escape. But curiosity pulled at him. Something had fallen from the sky less than a mile from his cabin. He grabbed his first aid kit out of habit, pulled on his jacket, and strapped a flashlight to his head. The crisp night air filled his lungs as he hiked through the dense trees toward the crash site. The blue glow led him forward. 20 minutes later, Jack found a clearing that hadn't existed yesterday. Smoldering earth and broken trees formed a path that ended at a small craft unlike anything he had ever seen. It was round, about the size of a car, with smooth silver metal that seemed to flow like liquid in the moonlight. "Hello. Anyone there?" Jack called out, knowing it was foolish. Whatever this was, it wasn't from around here. A weak moan answered him. Jack approached carefully. Part of the craft had split open, revealing the small cockpit. Inside, tangled in what looked like a mess of glowing wires, was a figure. Not human. Definitely not human. The creature was female. At least that's what Jack's brain told him based on her general shape. Her skin was pale blue with swirling patterns that glowed faintly. She had 2 arms, 2 legs, a torso, and a head. But everything was slightly wrong. Her fingers were too long. Her eyes, now fluttering open, were large and solid purple without any whites. A clear fluid, blood, trickled from a gash on her forehead. Jack's training kicked in before his fear could take over. Injured meant help needed, human or not. "I'm going to help you," he said slowly, pointing to himself, then to her. "Help." The alien tried to move and cried out in pain. The sound was high-pitched, almost musical, but unmistakably a cry of suffering. Jack carefully entered the craft. Up close, he saw that one of her legs was bent at an unnatural angle. Broken, her breathing was rapid and shallow, if that was even breathing. But she was alive, conscious, and clearly in pain. "I need to get you somewhere safe," Jack said, knowing she couldn't understand. When he touched her arm, she flinched, then locked eyes with him. For a moment, Jack felt dizzy, like something had passed between them. Then she relaxed slightly, as if deciding to trust him. It took 30 minutes to carefully free her from the wreckage. She lost consciousness twice. Jack wrapped her broken leg in a makeshift splint and gently carried her back toward his cabin. She weighed less than he expected, maybe 80 pounds, despite being nearly as tall as him. By the time they reached the cabin, dawn was breaking. Jack laid her on his bed and got a better look at her injuries in the light. The broken leg, the head wound, and what appeared to be burns along her right side. Her clothes, if you could call the silver material that, were torn and stained with clear fluid. "What am I supposed to do with an alien?" Jack whispered to himself as he cleaned her wounds. He had no idea if human medicine would help or harm her. The alien's eyes opened again. She looked at Jack with an expression he couldn't read, then at the bandages he was applying. She made a soft trilling sound before passing out again. Jack sat back in his chair and ran his hands through his hair. "Well," he said to the empty cabin, "this changes things." Outside, birds began their morning songs, unaware that Earth had just received its first visitor from the stars. 3 days passed. Jack barely slept, checking on his strange guest every hour. He cleaned her wounds with fresh water, set her broken leg properly, and tried to get her to drink. Sometimes she would swallow the water he offered. Other times it would just run down her chin. On the morning of the 4th day, Jack woke up in his chair to find a pair of large purple eyes staring at him. The alien was fully awake, her body tense, pressed against the wall despite her injuries. "Hey, take it easy," Jack said, raising his hands to show they were empty. "You're safe." The alien made a series of clicks and whistles that Jack knew were words in her language. Her glowing patterns brightened with what Jack guessed was fear. "I'm Jack," he said, pointing to himself. "Jack." He pointed at her with a questioning look. The alien watched him for a long moment. Then she touched her chest and made a sound like Lyra. "Lyra," Jack repeated. "Nice to meet you." Over the next few hours, they began the slow work of building communication. Jack brought out a notebook and drew simple pictures. He pointed to objects and said their names. Lyra learned quickly, her eyes following everything he did. By evening, she could say a few words. Water, food, pain, thanks. Jack heated up some soup and offered it to her. Lyra sniffed it carefully before taking a small sip. Her face crunched up, but she drank it anyway. "Sorry," Jack said. "I don't know what your people eat." "People," Lyra repeated. She tapped her chest. "My people. Lumari." Jack nodded. "I'm human. Earth." He drew a quick picture of the planet. Lyra's eyes widened. She made an excited trilling sound and pointed to the drawing. "Earth. Yes, Earth." She tried to get up but winced in pain. Jack gently helped her lie back down. "Your leg is broken. You need to rest." Lyra seemed frustrated. She pointed to herself, then to the ceiling, then made a crashing motion with her hands. "I know," Jack said. "You crashed. I found you and brought you here." She nodded rapidly. Then she pointed to a small device on what remained of her silver clothing. It was dark and cracked. "Broken?" Jack asked. "Yes. Talk. Home." She mimicked speaking into the device. Jack examined it. The technology was unlike anything he'd ever seen, but it looked like some kind of communicator. He had always been good with machines, but this was far beyond his knowledge. "I'll try to help," he promised. That night, while Lyra slept, Jack went back to the crash site. The small craft had begun to sink into the earth, as if being absorbed by the soil itself. He gathered some pieces of the strange metal and a few devices that had spilled out. Maybe they could help fix Lyra's communicator. When he returned, he found Lyra sitting up in bed, her purple eyes glowing in the darkness. "You help Lyra," she said slowly. "Why?" Jack set down the alien technology. "Because you needed help. Human. All help." Jack smiled sadly. "No, not all humans would help you. Some would be afraid. Some might hurt you." Lyra studied his face. "You? Afraid?" "A little," Jack admitted. "But I was a medic, a healer, in the military. Helping injured people is what I do." Lyra's patterns glowed brighter. She reached out and touched Jack's hand. Her skin was cool and smooth, almost like touching silk. "Jack, good," she said. "Lyra, remember." The way she said it made Jack feel like these words held more meaning than he understood. There was a solemnity to her voice, as if she had just made an important promise. "You should rest more," Jack said, gently pulling his hand away. "Tomorrow, we'll try to fix your communicator." Lyra nodded, but her eyes stayed on him as he moved to his chair. Just before he fell asleep, he noticed that the patterns on her skin had formed new designs, swirls that somehow reminded him of the night sky. Whatever she was, wherever she came from, Jack knew his quiet life in the woods had changed forever. 2 weeks passed. Lyra's recovery amazed Jack. Her broken leg healed faster than any humans could, and her wounds closed without leaving scars. Her ability to learn English was even more impressive. She now spoke in full sentences, though her voice had a musical quality that made even simple words sound strange. "What is this?" Lyra asked one morning, pointing to the small bookshelf in Jack's cabin. "Those are books," Jack said. "Stories, information, ideas, all written down." Lyra's eyes widened. She reached for one, her long fingers careful as she opened it. "We have similar things," she said, "but not with paper, with light." Jack worked on Lyra's communicator each day. He had managed to power it up using parts from her ship, but it still couldn't send messages. According to Lyra, her people would be looking for her, but Earth was far from their normal travel routes. It might be months before they searched this area of space. "Tell me about your people," Jack said as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. He had made a crutch for Lyra so she could move around on her own. "The Lumari are travelers," she said. "We study other worlds to find new life. We believe all life is connected." She pointed to the patterns on her skin, which glowed softly in the fading light. "These show our connections." "They're beautiful," Jack said honestly. "Do they change?" Lyra nodded. "They show our emotions, our bonds, our history." She hesitated. "When you saved me, my patterns changed. See this." She pointed to a spiral pattern over her heart that Jack hadn't noticed before. "This is new. What does it mean?" Jack asked. Lyra looked away. "It is hard to explain. A bond of life. Very important to my people." Jack didn't push for more. Instead, he taught Lyra about Earth. He showed her his small collection of music, which fascinated her. He explained the seasons, showed her pictures of different places on Earth, and told her about the many cultures of humanity. One evening, Jack made a simple dinner with vegetables from his garden. Lyra watched him cook with intense curiosity. "You grow your own food," she said, "like we do on our ships." "You live on ships?" Jack asked, surprised. "Many Lumari do. Our homeworld was damaged long ago. Now we travel, looking for a new home." "You're refugees," Jack said, understanding in his voice. Lyra looked puzzled at the word. "People who had to leave their home because of danger or problems," Jack explained. Lyra's patterns dimmed slightly. "Yes, refugees." She tasted the word. "But we are happy. We have each other." After dinner, Jack noticed Lyra doing something strange. She knelt in the corner of the cabin, her patterns glowing brightly. Her hands moved in careful patterns while she whispered words in her own language. When she finished, Jack asked, "Was that a prayer?" Lyra seemed embarrassed. "A ritual. For connection." Later that night, Jack woke to find Lyra standing by the window, looking at the stars. Her patterns were glowing so brightly they lit up the room. "Do you miss your people?" Jack asked softly. "Yes," Lyra said, "but I am not alone." She turned to look at him, and Jack was struck by the intensity in her purple eyes. "My people have a saying," she said. "The one who saves your life becomes part of your life. Forever." "That's a nice thought," Jack said, not understanding the weight her words carried. Lyra touched the spiral pattern over her heart. "Not just a thought, Jack. A truth." Jack smiled and went back to sleep, unaware that in Lyra's culture, he had already become much more than just a kind stranger who had helped her. In the soft glow of her bioluminescent patterns, Lyra watched over him, her mind filled with thoughts of a bond Jack didn't yet comprehend. A month after the crash, Jack fixed Lyra's communicator. The small device hummed to life, its screen glowing with strange symbols. Lyra's face lit up, both literally and figuratively, as her skin patterns pulsed with excitement. "It works," she exclaimed, her fingers moving quickly across the device. "I can send a message to my people." "Will they come get you?" Jack asked. He was surprised by the hint of sadness in his own voice. "Yes," Lyra said, "but it may take time. Space is very big." Jack nodded. He had grown used to Lyra's company. After years of solitude, having someone to talk to each day had been nice. That afternoon, as Lyra sent messages to her people, Jack heard a faint buzzing sound outside. He looked through the window and spotted a small drone hovering at the edge of the forest. It wasn't one of the usual wildlife monitoring drones. This one was sleek, black, and clearly watching his cabin. "Lyra," he said quietly, "we might have a problem." Jack had always known this could happen. A strange craft falls from the sky, and sooner or later, someone would come looking. The military or some secret government agency, people who wouldn't just let an alien visitor go free. Lyra joined him at the window, now walking without her crutch. The drone moved closer, its camera lens focusing on them. "Is that your people?" she asked. "No," Jack said grimly. "That's my government. And they're not as friendly as I am." They watched as the drone flew away. "We should leave," Jack said, already gathering supplies. "It won't be long before they send people." Lyra looked confused. "Why hide? I am a peaceful visitor." Jack laughed without humor. "Humans aren't always good with visitors, Lyra, especially ones from other planets." As they packed food and water, Lyra's communicator beeped. The screen flashed with new symbols. "My people received my message," she said, reading the screen. "They are sending a ship. 3 Earth days." "Good," Jack said. "But we need to stay hidden until then." That night, as they camped in a cave 2 miles from the cabin, Lyra's communicator projected a hologram. It showed symbols that transformed into English words as Lyra adjusted the settings. "This is our translation program," she explained. "Now I can show you more about my culture." Jack watched as images appeared, beautiful ships sailing through space, worlds with strange landscapes, and Lumari people with glowing patterns like Lyra's. "Our bond system," Lyra said, showing an image of 2 Lumari with matching spiral patterns. "When one Lumari saves another's life, they form the bond of salvation." The hologram showed a ceremony with 2 Lumari holding hands, their patterns syncing together. "This bond is sacred," Lyra continued. "It connects 2 souls. In your terms, it would be most like." She paused, searching for the word. "Marriage." Jack blinked. "Marriage." "Yes," Lyra said, her patterns forming the now familiar spiral over her heart. "When you saved me, this pattern appeared. It is the first stage of the bond of salvation." Jack stared at her, realization dawning. "Are you saying that because I saved your life, we're married in your culture?" "Not yet," Lyra said. "The bond is forming, but not complete." She touched her spiral pattern, then reached out to touch Jack's chest. "It requires acceptance from both." "I accept, do you?" Before Jack could answer, the sound of helicopters echoed through the mountains. Lights swept over the forest below their hideout. "They're coming," Jack whispered. Lyra looked at the approaching lights, then back at Jack, her eyes questioning. "Jack?" "The bond." The helicopters grew louder. "Lyra, Jack began, but was cut off by a sudden beeping from Lyra's communicator. The screen flashed urgent symbols. Lyra's patterns pulsed with alarm. "My ship," she said. "It's coming now. Emergency protocol." She looked at Jack with intense purple eyes. "You must decide quickly. We need to move." Jack grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her deeper into the cave system. His years in the military had taught him these mountains well. The helicopter spotlights swept across the cave entrance as they hurried through a narrow tunnel. Jack switched on his flashlight, guiding them through the darkness. "Jack," Lyra said, her voice echoing off the stone walls. "You didn't answer about the bond." "This isn't really the time, Lyra," Jack replied, listening for sounds of pursuit. They emerged into a larger chamber with a small underground stream. Jack stopped to fill their water bottles. "Your people don't understand what you are," he explained. "They might be afraid. They might want to study you, keep you locked up." Lyra's patterns dimmed. "And your answer about the bond. Are you afraid of that too?" Jack sighed. "Lyra, in human culture, marriage is different. It's not automatic when someone saves a life. It's a choice made after 2 people know each other well, after they fall in love." "Love." Lyra tested the word. "We have a similar concept. Deep connection, respect, desire to protect." Her patterns formed new shapes, pulsing with soft light. "I feel these for you." Before Jack could respond, a deep rumble shook the cave. Dust fell from the ceiling. "That's not the helicopters," Jack said. Lyra's communicator beeped urgently. My ship has entered your atmosphere, she said, reading the symbols. They are coming for me. They made their way to a higher cave entrance that opened onto a cliff face. In the valley below, Jack could see military vehicles converging on his cabin. Above, the night sky glowed with an unnatural light as something massive descended through the clouds. Your rescue is causing quite a stir, Jack said, watching the growing chaos. The Lumari ship was beautiful and terrifying, a spiral of silver and blue light, far larger than Jack had imagined. As it descended, all human vehicles stopped moving. Their lights went out. They disabled your technology, Lyra explained. Standard procedure for uncontacted worlds. Jack turned to her. This is first contact, isn't it? The first time humans and Lumari have officially met. Lyra nodded. Yes. Not how we planned it. And I'm in the middle of an interstellar incident, Jack said with a humorless laugh. Jack, Lyra said, her voice suddenly serious. If I return without completing the bond of salvation, I will be diminished among my people. The one who refuses such a bond is seen as rejecting the sacred gift. You'd be an outcast, Jack asked. Not entirely. But I would carry the mark of rejection. Her patterns dimmed to almost nothing. It would be painful. Jack ran his hands through his hair. And if I say yes, what then? You would be welcomed among my people, honored as my bonded one. Would I have to leave Earth? Not forever, Lyra said. But to complete the ceremony, yes. The Lumari ship now hovered directly over the valley. A beam of light shot down, scanning the area. Military personnel scattered, some raising weapons that no longer functioned. They will find us soon, Lyra said. Her communicator projected a small hologram of the ship. I must tell them where we are. Jack stared at the chaos below, then at the alien ship, then finally at Lyra. Her purple eyes watched him, waiting. I never planned for any of this, he said quietly. I just wanted to be left alone. Life rarely follows our plans, Lyra replied. My ship crashed. You found me. Now we both face choices we didn't expect. The communicator beeped insistently. Lyra raised her finger to activate it but paused. Jack Miller, she said formally. I asked one last time. Do you accept the bond of salvation between us? In the valley below, human and alien worlds were colliding, and Jack stood at the center of it all, faced with a decision that would change not just his life, but potentially the relationship between two species. I need time, Jack said, his voice strained. This is all happening too fast. Lyra's patterns flickered with what looked like disappointment, but she nodded. I understand. She activated her communicator. A beam of light shot up from the device, connecting with the massive ship above. Moments later, a smaller craft detached from the main ship and descended toward their cave. They're coming for us, Lyra said. For me. The small craft hovered outside the cave entrance. It was sleek and silver, similar to Lyra's crashed ship but larger. The door slid open, revealing two tall Lumari with elaborate pattern displays across their blue skin. One of them stepped forward. Unlike Lyra, this Lumari wore a uniform of some kind, with metallic symbols that Jack guessed indicated rank. I am Commander Taro, the Lumari said in perfect English, surprising Jack. Lyra, we received your distress signal. Lyra bowed slightly. Commander, thank you for the rescue. Taro's gaze shifted to Jack, purple eyes studying him intently. This is the human who saved you. Yes, Lyra said. His name is Jack Miller. Jack stepped forward. Look, I don't want any trouble. I was just helping someone in need. Commander Taro's patterns formed complex shapes. By Lumari law, your action created a sacred bond. Has Lyra explained this to you? Yes, Jack said. But in human culture, saving someone doesn't automatically create that kind of relationship. Before Taro could respond, the sound of helicopters grew louder. 3 military aircraft appeared, hovering at a distance. Through a megaphone, a voice called out, "Attention, unidentified craft. This is the United States military. Stand down immediately." Commander Taro looked annoyed. "Your species is quite bold for one so primitive." A new figure appeared at the cave entrance, a woman in a dark suit, flanked by two soldiers with weapons drawn. "I'm Agent Davis with the Department of Defense," she announced. "We've been tracking this situation since the crash." She nodded to Jack Miller, former staff sergeant, Army Medical Corps. "You've been busy." "I was just helping her," Jack said, "by harboring an extraterrestrial." Agent Davis said, "That's a matter of national security." Commander Taro stepped between them. The human acted honorably. "Lyra is a citizen of the Astral Coalition, with full diplomatic protection." "Diplomatic?" Agent Davis raised an eyebrow. "We have no diplomatic relations with your coalition." "Perhaps it is time to establish some," Taro replied. Jack watched the standoff, amazed. In just a month, he had gone from a solitary life to standing between two worlds. Agent Davis pressed a finger to her earpiece, listening to something. "My superiors are requesting a formal meeting. We have a base 20 miles from here." Commander Taro consulted his own device. "Acceptable. We will bring our diplomatic team." He turned to Jack. "You will join us. This situation concerns you directly." 2 hours later, Jack sat in a conference room at a military base, still trying to process everything. Across from him, a team of high-ranking military officials and government agents faced an equal number of Lumari representatives. "The bond between a rescuer and the rescued is sacred to us," a Lumari diplomat explained. "It forms the foundation of our society." "But you can't expect a human to follow your customs," argued a general. Miller had no knowledge of these implications. Lyra, sitting beside Commander Taro, spoke up. "The bond has already begun to form." She revealed the spiral pattern over her heart. "To break it now would be painful." "Painful how?" Agent Davis asked. "It would be seen as a rejection of our most fundamental values," Taro explained. "It could damage relations between our peoples before they even begin." Jack listened as they discussed him as if he weren't there. His future, Earth's future with these aliens, all hanging on his decision about a cultural custom he'd never heard of until yesterday. "Don't I get a say in this?" he finally interrupted. All eyes turned to him, human and alien alike. "Of course," Commander Taro said. "The choice must be yours. But understand that your choice will have consequences beyond yourself." Jack looked at Lyra, whose patterns had dimmed to almost nothing. Then at the room full of officials waiting for his answer. "I need to speak with Lyra," he said. Alone, the small room they gave Jack and Lyra for privacy had no windows, just a table, 2 chairs, and a camera in the corner with its red light blinking. "They're still watching us," Jack said, pointing to the camera. Lyra touched her communicator. The red light went dark. "Now they are not," she said with a small smile. Jack sat across from her. "This is crazy. A month ago, I was just a guy living alone in the woods. Now I'm in the middle of first contact between Earth and aliens, and somehow I'm also dealing with an accidental engagement." Lyra's patterns rippled. "It is not what either of us expected." "Lyra," Jack said gently, "I like you. You're amazing. But marriage, or whatever your people call it, that's a big step. On Earth, people usually take years to decide that." "I understand," Lyra said. Her patterns dimmed. "I do not wish to force our ways on you. And I don't want to hurt you or cause problems between our worlds," Jack replied. "There has to be a middle way." Lyra was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then her patterns brightened suddenly. "Perhaps there is." When they returned to the conference room, Jack stood at the center of the table. All eyes turned to him. "I have a proposal," he said, feeling strange to be addressing military leaders and alien diplomats. "A compromise." Commander Taro leaned forward. "We are listening." I'll participate in a modified version of the Bond of Salvation ceremony, Jack explained. Not as a full marriage by Lumari standards, but as a symbol of friendship between our peoples. Lyra's patterns pulsed with bright light, a bond of alliance rather than marriage, she added. It would honor the life-saving act without the full commitment of lifelong bonding. The Lumari delegates conferred among themselves, their patterns creating a like show across the room. This is acceptable, Commander Taro finally said. It would preserve the honor of the act while respecting human customs. Agent Davis looked skeptical. And what does this bond of alliance mean for Earth? It would make Jack Miller the first official human friend of the Lumari people, Taro explained. A cultural ambassador, you might say. The human officials huddled together, whispering urgently. We'd need authorization from the highest levels, the general said. Then get it, Jack said firmly, because this is the best solution for everyone. 3 days later, on a hilltop near where Lyra's ship had first crashed, a ceremony took place. Lumari officials in formal attire stood on one side. Human diplomats and military personnel stood on the other. Above them, the Lumari ship hovered silently, its lights painting the evening sky. Jack wore his old army dress uniform, the only formal clothes he owned. Lyra wore a flowing silver garment that seemed to move like water. Commander Taro led the ceremony, speaking first in the musical Lumari language, then in English. Today we witness not just the bond of alliance between Jack Miller and Lyra, but between Earth and the Astral Coalition. From an act of compassion, a bridge between worlds is formed. Lyra placed her hand over the spiral pattern on her chest. Jack mirrored the gesture, placing his hand over his heart. Together, they spoke the words Lyra had taught him. From life saved comes life shared. From stranger comes ally. From two paths comes one journey. A soft blue light passed from Lyra's hand to Jack's chest, warming him. For a moment, his skin glowed with a faint pattern similar to Lyra's. When it was done, representatives from both sides signed formal documents. Earth had officially made first contact with the Astral Coalition. Later, as they stood watching the sunset, Lyra turned to Jack. "What will you do now?" she asked. Jack looked up at the Lumari ship, then back to the Earth stretching out below them. "I've been asked to visit your world," he said, as Earth's first ambassador to the Lumari. "And after?" Lyra asked, her patterns forming hopeful shapes. Jack smiled. "After that, who knows? We've got all of space and time to figure it out." As the stars appeared in the darkening sky, Jack took Lyra's hand. Whatever the future held, it would be an adventure neither of them had expected when a ship fell from the stars and a human rescued a wounded alien girl.